Greetings. Today's show we're calling Strippers at the Fremont Factory number 2. And the idea being that one of the reasons for Tesla stock price to suddenly drop is the idea that Tesla got $2 billion and all of a sudden decided to spend all that money on strippers and cocaine, and therefore the stock price deserved to be down, and we kind of analyzed that. The next thing that we cover is sort of a pinning process for the day, given that it's Friday. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. I want to also thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. Your presence makes a big difference and is greatly appreciated. I also wanted to note that we've kind of cut down on our live shows because we're getting a number of trolls that are making comments on the show that could get us banned by YouTube, which I think is part of the process. So, we'd appreciate it if you guys would stop doing that. And we'd love to have a show that works and don't appreciate what you're up to. I'm sort of back in the studio, back in the live stream again, versus us just posting shows while I was on the road, partially as a result of some of these attacks. And so we kind of apologize for that happening. Today we always sort of do stuff really different and crazy, and this is kind of one of them. One of the processes that's going on for companies like Tesla is when big entities that they compete with want to find ways to sort of perhaps put a little fly in the ointment, they'll kind of spread news out there that's sort of negative and sort of let that news sort of stew with the investing to see if they can undermine the success of a firm. So, we kind of see this going on in a lot of different ways. And I sort of decided to call this my stripper cocaine show because one of the themes about Tesla as of a year or two ago was just the idea that it wasn't a legitimate company that was actually going to work. It was just a bunch of guys in the valley that are just having fun, and they're really not serious. I wanted to note that Chad, one of our viewers, asked me where the strippers were, and I think that's the point, is that there are no strippers or cocaine, but the point is that as people run for the hills to avoid Tesla in certain situations, this is what's happening. By the way, this is a sidebar now, just to say that we've been sort of bouncing between mics, etc. The current mic I'm using is our oldest mic, but it works and it doesn't have a lot of static in it like our newest mic does. So we have some new equipment that's supposed to arrive today that'll allow us to address the static issue you heard in our last show. So we apologize for that issue, but we're working hard to make sure we clean up the problem. So what I wanted to move over to is, what the heck happened yesterday in Tesla stock? The price of the stock rose rather, well, as we were preparing for our story, we looked at the stock price and it was down about 27 bucks. And I thought on Thursday there was a pinning action that was sort of starting already. And it turns out there was actually a reaction to the news that Tesla was issuing $2 billion in stock. So it kind of makes sense for the stock to be down on that news because it's dilutive, meaning the more shares that are out there incrementally, every share that existed prior just went down slightly in value. So in theory, a slight down in the stock price makes sense from that logic. So nonetheless, as you saw, there was a big move down in the stock price and then a big move up. So we wanted to try to review some logic that might fit what's going on, even though the 100% of what happened is kind of not known yet. So there's something that I was reviewing in a trading show that I think is appropriate to discuss here, and that is that we're now in the world of bots, meaning that there are these computers that have been trained that anytime there's negative news on a certain company, they sell quickly. That way, they can avoid the company taking losses as the stock price falls. But then the managers who are sort of over those computers can get back in and see should they have sold or should they have kept their positions, and then they can then rebuild their positions to sort of go against the bots, if you will. So my take on this whole thing is that there are a lot of people, as the stock price moves lower, both on news and the fact that it's moving lower, are really on the get us out of here zone, and then sort of come back after the dust clears. What I find strange about this is that activity yesterday / what happens over the next 3 days, maybe a week, we're sort of entering the zone that we believe that large institutions are now starting to buy after letting the dust clear on Tesla's earnings. And sort of what we talked about maybe a week before earnings was the fact that the really hot funds can actually dive in quickly and do things in terms of hedge funds. And then about 3 days later, the larger institutions kind of weigh in, and you start to see their buying in that process. And so one of the groups that we talked about that we thought was interesting is just the fact that there is a group out there of sort of large, well-heeled traders or money managers who kind of wait out the first couple of weeks to let the dust settle on earnings, and now they start building positions, at or near the trough of where prices might be for a while for a company like Tesla. So this is kind of, what we see as a possibility of what's going on. I have to say, though, you have to learn how to trade, invest, anything. And it's amazing to watch the process of, how different constituencies are battling in the space for supremacy, and some of the variables that force that thing around. It's like amazing. Indeed, there was a 9% swing in the price of the stock in one day, and that's pretty amazing amount of price swing and value swing in a short period of time. As we said, it is Friday. We're expecting some pinning. Stock is over 800, 804 is the last I saw, but I'm really expecting the big firms to figure out how to get it below 800, heading for 775 if they can, because it leaves a lot of stuff to go expired in the process, and they lose a lot of money if it doesn't. So let's stay tuned. It's the theory that I've shared has worked over the last few weeks, and we'll see if they're able to pull it off once again today. The next thing I want to sort of dive into is this whole coronavirus issue. Carl, our friend in southern France, has been sort of bugging me about the fact that the coronavirus was going to be huge, and I said it wasn't going to affect the stock, and he said it was, and I kind of won that first round of that discussion. I've been discussing the fact that I really think in the second round he kind of beats me on this issue, because it keeps burning on my brain the fact that Wuhan allowed 5 million people to leave, and the problem that happens is that when 5 million people leave and a decent percentage of them are infected, that means wherever they go, those places become infected. So you sort of spread the disease instantly. And the more rural you go, you probably don't have the hospital facilities to help tame the virus relative to that area. So you have families bringing it, rushing back to country locations and bringing the virus with them, infecting and causing to die all their family members who they're supposed to care about and not want to affect, if you will. So we have a friend of the show who's a doctor. His name is Sem, and he indicated that he really felt that the numbers were way higher than was being articulated, and he's being proven right. And the question is, where does it not affect people? And nobody seems to have a handle of how do we get beyond it into our next zone. So I think all these questions result in high likelihood that we end up with, lockdowns that we already see going on in China, but high likelihood that you have, production or items that are required that are being produced in those areas no longer being available to manufacturers. So as the country tries to get its manufacturing base going again, they're stuck in a, what can we do zone and what does and does not work. Clearly the horror would be to have a place like Tesla have one or two people that were infected and then they infect the whole staff, and now you're shut down because all your trained workers are now busy, sick, and potentially dying. So I'm sort of holding my breath, holding my fingers that people can hang in there until they finally have some vaccines that can be implemented, because it doesn't seem like anybody has a full handle on things. And if anything, not having complete process, as in quarantining everybody early, has not been occurring. And so we now have, I want to say, an ugly situation here where we have a lot of people who are exposed and a lot of disease that's spreading out, but there's no sign of how this is going to be stopped. There are a number of our viewers who are traders, etc. I really think every ship that's shown with a few coronavirus people on it and the whole ship being quarantined suggests that one industry that's just going to get smashed right now is the cruise industry, because how would you like going on a cruise that you paid a lot of money for and getting quarantined on that ship because of letting folks on who now have the disease? And so we end up with a sort of a crazy situation going on in that space. Switching, sort of the next thing that we wanted to cover today is that yesterday it was announced that this issuance of stock was being done. All the numeric implications of this sort of focus on the fact that we know what happened. We know that there's a quick move, mostly to the upside by Tesla stock price on the news of these of the changeover in the $2 billion of shares issued. I was a little surprised that so Tesla had a number of options about how it could deal with those options issues, or how to deal with refinancing. I actually thought what they were going to do was to pull in old debt and reissue it at lower interest rates. That way they still have the debt, but they have to pay less for it. I guess this still could occur, but even another option I thought that was out there that would have been really interesting would have been to see Tesla issue $5 or $10 billion worth of stock and instantly retire all the debt associated with it. So the whole debt picture would have been lower, even if it was perhaps more dilutive than what they did. Nonetheless, the higher stock price does reduce, because of its relationship to par on the bonds, it actually does reduce their overall cost of operations already. And that's built into the variability of the interest rates in that regard. So, kudos to Tesla for getting this refi done. I think it's, very necessary in order to provide capital, given the number of growth initiatives they're working on. I really think that we're still 2 business days away from what the large institutions think of this change, and it kind of feels like the 3-day rule that we talked about is, the big guys can't afford to be wrong, so they tend to move slowly and make sure they carefully review all the data before deciding what they're going to do. So I expect that to be nonetheless the case here, and we look forward to what the outcome of this is, and we actually hope you make a little money as they come in and say, give it their blessing that it's actually a good idea. The other thing I'm amazed by, sort of circulating around this whole issue of Tesla's dramatic stock price move yesterday, was the fact that it's amazing to me, I want to say, the bot learning process. So if you watch what's been happening over the last couple of months is there seems to be 3 tiers of analysts. The the bottom tier, Tesla's going to 200 or 300, maybe bankrupt. The middle tier, Tesla is a good company with a valuation that's too high, about 600, 650 makes sense. And then there's a third tier of folks that are saying, yeah, this is $1,000 stock, and that has been a fairly small group of people that seems to be increasing over time as Tesla continues to do good implementation. So we were thrilled to see Mr. Ives from Wedbush come out with a 1,000 target for Tesla. This really helps start the process of green lighting of the $1,000 price point for Tesla going forward. One of the questions that can come up as we go through this process of a small company growing like Tesla is, what is the trend and what can we expect to really be happening here? And I want to reference you to something that really I thought was interesting that I've been thinking about for the last few days, and that is that if you go back and look at Microsoft stock at the beginning of last year, right after earnings in January, the stock actually moved. I mean, earnings came out, the stock was $100 per share. It sort of had a trading range of probably 95 or towards 90, and then at the high side about 100, 102. And then there's this sense of, maybe its run for the next period is over. Now we're a year away from that, and the stock, last I checked, was in the 150s. So nice growth in stock price related to growth in their business. I was sort of implying as we look over at Tesla, the fact that, man, there's been a lot of wild rides, a lot of fast moves in terms of the stock and slash options, and a lot of money being made, and kind of what can we look forward to. And I really felt that we were kind of going to enter a trading range finally versus dramatic moves until we have major company news in the form of earnings or number of vehicles sold or something like that. But hey, issuing stock is just as good a block news to influence thing as anything else. So I think it makes sense, and there's a lot to support where it's at. Any rate, we're kind of at the point of the show. We're happy to answer questions. We did think it was unusual. I am expecting pinning to happen today as usual, and I believe that as the institutions get to sort of bake in what the implications of this sale, things are going at the, I was trying to pick up a note here regarding the factory drone video showing everything's moving smoothly in terms of production in China. And I guess the smooth part I'm looking for is how are you going to get those cars to people who are not allowed to drive, given that places have been shut down. But if you're actually going to have an economy working, people do have to get to work, even if they're not taking public transport. That might land them in sort of biohazard cars like Teslas. So the question just came up: is it clever clickbait? The strippers relative to Tesla, and we've actually kind of used this title before, and the concept behind the title is just the fact that there are a lot of people, in the case of IBM and all these other firms, they're established firms, and there'll be news that's tossed out there that has no bearing on reality, but people react to it heavily. And so the idea being that we're in Silicon Valley where Tesla operates, and there's a possibility that they're doing things that are sort of not kosher. Therefore, if there's any news and it's slightly bad, you need to run for the hills. So other news that's been put out there, for example, with the Wall Street Journal is Tesla has a bad parking problem. So what they were saying is not they don't know how to park cars. What they're saying is they have all these cars everywhere and they look disorganized, so it might be a sign that it's a bad company to invest in. So as individuals, et cetera, have gone for that. It's been interesting. So part of what my argument was is that one of the reasons after they issue stock to make the balance sheet stronger, you'd run for the hills because clearly they might be using the money for strippers or other things that they shouldn't be. And so that's why I chose that title, because I thought it was kind of interesting to look at the reticence to look at Tesla as a solid firm that's that's performing well, and that's not, there is no issue of that nature. But when people are running away, they typically do so with the idea in mind is, oh, we found out the miracle really doesn't work, and a good thing that we got out when we did. And speaking of that, one of the fun negative analysis by folks came from Jim Chanos, and Jim Chanos was saying that it's another Enron waiting to happen. And Enron did some off-balance sheet things and other things that just didn't work as a business. And I'm always fascinated by that, because I keep thinking of the fact that if you get your Tesla and you put solar roof panels on the roof, you kind of really deal with the company if you need to, but you kind of don't have to. And so as a result, you get to have your whole Tesla universe and optimizing your life without Tesla being at all involved. So therefore, this whole idea of, it's another Enron is sort of hampered by that. And so that's kind of how that works. I was sort of eager to give I kind of enjoy the interaction on live shows, because it gives myself a chance to interact with you and you with other folks that are on the channel in conversation, and then we can sort of post that, and we also have the flavor of people who've watched the show that wasn't live, can kind of be a part of that conversation as well. So I do enjoy the lives, but obviously there are drawbacks in a number of ways. But we try to at least mix that in, once or twice a week with everything else we're doing. Again, I think where we're at right now is it's a Friday. I do think we should see some pinning action today. I do believe with the 3-day rule based on the new issuance, people are going to carefully review that in terms of what their action is going to be early week, particularly Tuesday is my target day at day 3, as you know. And I'm really happy. I've had a chance to interact with a lot of folks from my channel, and I'm happy to hear you guys been making money off of advice. And I think my real goal is to have you know things that allow you to move well on your trades or investing, and to all of a sudden say, oh, well, Greg talked about it before, I already know it. That's exactly what I'm trying to get to, where you already know a lot of key things that are going to be coming at you, and you're able to sort of find your way to what you want to do, and be successful in doing it. Now, a last thing I wanted to note is that there's something called the SEC, and you guys have to be careful about throwing questions at me about, am I going to buy this stock at this price or option? I can do an email with you on a private basis, but I can't do that stuff publicly without getting in trouble. So thanks for always asking. We do have our $45 for advanced training. I just finished that this morning and started sending out to those people who've paid for it. And so if you want to do that on Patreon, we're ready to go on that. The SpaceX trip is coming together nicely. I will be flying to California Tuesday at the latest. I was hoping to fly Sunday if I got a good flight price, to spend a couple of weeks out there sort of laying the groundwork for that trip. And you'll see a lot of shows from California as a result. And so we're happy to support your knowledge gain here. Questions about show ideas that you'd like to see happen would be great. One of the things I'm looking forward to in Southern California is being able to visit some of the Tesla-built solar facilities there and giving you guys some video and images of that, because we got a lot of questions about what's happening with the solar business. But unlike cars where you can count the cars being sold or you see them at your local dealerships, it's really hard to, unless you wait until the end of the quarter, get your hands on data. Martin, just email us if you have ideas for shows at admin@teslafaninsight.com, and we're happy to sort of look through those options and kind of go from there. Any rate, I think that's about covers it for today. Thank you once again for joining us. As usual, we have our health tips. Remember, don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4. Let the food digest and you don't get acid reflux and potentially cancer. Number 1. Number 2, no more than once a week fried foods. Number 3, also consider a 5-2 or other sort of fasting type of diet. Great for mental health management over time. Our newest one from Mr. Petrobono and is recommended to start doing a couple or 3 times a week weightlifting as a way to increase bone density. And the 25 leg lifts per leg at 5 pounds is actually potentially part of that. There's a rope jumping was also a suggestion. Hey, cardio, you definitely have to get it in there, and I may have to get a rope. Or actually, I have some ropes here, but I'm thinking that I've just been going on the treadmill and doing the elliptical as my warm up the body as you're preparing to lift weights, and that's kind of what I was going to do now. But I think I may integrate maybe some rope jumping as a cardio warm up method, and I appreciate the suggestion. At any rate, once again, thank you all for joining us. Tschüss German, au revoir French, liegt rot, Hoda Hafez Farsi, Hejdo Swedish, Do widzenia Polish, Zdravstvuyte Russian, Ni hao ma, hello in Chinese. Thanks once again for joining us. We look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day, and bye for now.